Welcome to By-The-Bywater, a podcast on the Megaphonic Network. I'm Ned Raggett.
I'm Oriana Schwint.
I'm Jared Pekacek.
And we're here to talk about all things J.R.R. Tolkien, his work, his inspirations and impact, creative interpretations in other media, languages, lore, rip-offs, parodies, anything we think is interesting. Thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to the 27th episode of By-The-Bywater. It is great to be back with you all. We have made our way through another month. Life seems to be getting better and better on a certain pandemic front. We'll leave it at that. We hope everyone's very well taken care of right by now. And the only major random Tolkien news I can think of on the day involves the fact that Sergio Aguero retired from Man City today, and he's got a big thing of Tengwar on his arm. So there you go. You see, Tolkien is everywhere. So. And the thing that I like about that was he actually got it because he was envious of Fernando Torres having Tengwar on his arm because he was the real Tolkien nerd. So again, enjoy.
Layers. Although I did have a 7-Eleven cashier the other day who asked me what language my the tattoos around my arm are in, and I said Elvish, and he went, "What?" And I was like, Elvish, like Lord of the Rings. And he laughed at me. So.
Aww.
So sad.
Yep.
Such bias against our community.
Right?
Yeah. That's what we want to focus on.
Exactly. Yes. A very serious topic
Persecution
right now, clearly.
Against the Tolkienista.
I am marginalized. I'm oppressed.
It was terrible. No, we'll put in head legislation. Take care of
Thoughts
that
and
matter.
prayers for me, please.
Oh.
Thank you.
There was a period of time where if I didn't understand something my dad said, like I didn't hear it or whatever, I would say, "What?" He would go, "Oh, would you get it if I was speaking in Elvish?" And I was just like, "Wow."
You should have said yes. Yeah, Dad, come on.
Get with the program. It's 2001. These are the biggest movies in the world.
And now we're at the point where, as we were joking about earlier, Jared can go live in Lothlórien apartments up in Seattle. But, there you go.
It is the U district, though. I don't know if I want to live in the U district.
Is that university?
Yeah, the university district. That's not my scene.
Well, Ned sent the listing to our Slack, and I checked it out, and there were all these comments that were like, "There's a bunch of drug dealers who come here a lot," and I just had fun envisioning drug dealers in Lothlórien, which is funny considering
Black
what we're
market
about to talk about.
Under
right?
the table.
I
got these
from the south farther.
I got the good leaf.
It's powdered limbus. You just snort it.
Oh, God.
Okay, we could go on creating silly bad SNL sketches from there, but we won't. So
They're doing this now.
Indeed, yeah, another failure. But there is, we do have a main topic which we'll get to. There is some news, I guess, we're about to get to, so we might as well just go in with it. So, Jared, please, as always, do take it away.
A big surprise. There's nothing to report. We're now in the Middle-earth version of waiting for Godot when it comes to anything regarding the Amazon Middle-earth series. Well, maybe not, entirely the case, because Charlotte Brandstrom has been announced as being a director for 2 more episodes of the final season. She's directed episodes of shows like Outlander, The Witcher, and The Man in the High Castle. So, like Wayne Chayette, she brings a general experience with genre series to the production. Beyond that, the only other notable thing to report is Chinese-Canadian actor Ludi Lin asking publicly why there aren't more actors of Asian background in the production, which is itself a response to Amazon Studios head Jennifer Salke talking about the now well-known massive budget outlay for the series and their plainly obvious desire to make it a worldwide smash. Whatever else may be happening behind the scenes, who knows? There's nothing. There's no art. There's no photos. There's no trailer. This is Schrodinger's TV series. Listen in next time, and we'll try and determine again whether or not it really exists.
Right?
It's just money laundering. That's all it is. It's not real.
There's nothing there. The cameras don't actually record anything. The actors don't actually learn any lines. It's all mimed.
Well, it's interesting. What is, to compare and contrast for a minute, there's the other big series, The Wheel of Time, right? We've got And we've got like the merest fragment, right? Of
literally the 5 seconds of Rosamund Pike in
That's
Wheel
right.
of Time
Yeah.
is more than we've got of anything. Yeah.
But I also feel like we know at least who the actors are playing in the Wheel of Time. Like we
Yeah.
know Rosamund Pike is Moraine. No, who is she playing again?
Oh, yeah, I think it's Moraine.
I mean,
yeah, so, yeah.
I don't know personally, but that's just because I've forgotten.
Yeah, but they did, like, they announced a cast list with people
Yeah.
and characters. So
I mean, they've even gone so far as to say, I mean, they've gone ahead. They hadn't done this. They'd already done this for the Lord of the Rings series, but they hadn't done this for the Wheel of Time one. They've gone ahead and formally renewed that one as well for a second season. And they've even gone on record as saying that they already have particular plans about how they're going to do it to adapt or match with or not match with the books. So in other words, it sounds like, oh, they have a concrete idea of where they're going. Maybe that's the case with the Amazons and the Lord of the Rings series, but who knows?
wasn't the Lord of the Rings series picked up for another season or something? Sight unseen?
Yes, it has been officially renewed. I think we announced that a couple of months back, but
Yeah.
or
Like, I
mentioned
can't
that.
remember anything. We're in a pandemic. Time is fake.
Yeah, the time is fake. The series is fake. We're all fake.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it too has been sent for a second season, so they'll forthcoming. I mean, at this point, I mean, especially since I haven't seen any sort of like formal like declaration, yes or no, I'm going to say that any claims that this will be ready by for showing at the end of the year are bogus. I am not
Yeah.
believing it. So it'll, this is next year at the earliest. I can't see this happening unless they're doing it, unless they're explaining on like launching the pilot Bayona directed as a standalone thing and then leading everyone
No.
into it, which I don't see either. Yeah, I just
I would like that, honestly.
it could work. There's no reason why that couldn't work. It's an approach. It's a different approach,
Yeah.
but it's not that different compared to other things. I mean, famously, reaching back into the misty bolts of time, Babylon 5 was like that, where its series opening
Yeah.
was a standalone TV movie,
Yeah.
and then the series arrived like a year later or something like that.
Yeah.
And there were some changes after that. So, I mean, it could happen, but
Battlestar Galactica did that too, I want to say. had
They
the
did,
miniseries
yeah.
and then-
Yeah, I don't quite see Amazon
No.
doing that. Although who knows at this point, it's all every single decision about the publicity surrounding this show, or the total lack thereof, has been just totally baffling to me.
It is,
Mhm.
yeah. I've probably said this before because I know we kind of keep chewing the same bones here, but like, wonder if part of it is the fan base being what it is. Anything you release is going to ignite some sort of controversy because people are going to be like, oh, well, that's not how I picture Armenelos the Golden, or like that's Galadriel. Are you kidding me?
But
That
why
kind
do
of
you care if you're Amazon is what I don't understand, because they know that is genuinely a tiny, tiny proportion of the people who actually are going to want this series.
Right,
It's
yeah.
just so weird, and especially like Game of Thrones had their cast list and everything, and I think there may have been some sort of like, but people seemed mostly pleased and excited to talk about it, and I think that kind of led to the general success of that first season.
I mean, I might be projecting here just my personal taste onto Amazon, where it's like if I personally was adapting a Tolkien thing, I would not want to deal with some segments of the fan base yelling at me for like going off book.
I guess, but you're gonna have to at some point. You're gonna have to deal with it.
I know I'm going to be doing some yelling no matter what. So,
I mean, we've seen it with the Potter fan base. We even see it with the Star Wars fan base, which, of course, is a little weird because there is no book to go off to. It's more a matter of, perception of characters. That's its own things and all that. We'll no need to go over that again.
Canon, therefore it's invalid.
Yeah. So you're right about all this. I mean, the one thing I can think of in terms of where Game of Thrones and the announcement thing was sort of a model that I don't think we have in this one, is that with that one, when the cast list was announced, everyone kind of knew who Sean Bean was. Nobody else was at that level. in terms of perception at the time, wider knowledge. Certainly, there were people who were very well respected as actors who already were cast in that. Peter Dinklage had already made his name on a variety of productions and was well known as being a good actor and things like this. But Sean Bean was everyone kind of knew who Sean Bean was.
It's Boromir.
Yeah, well,
they got Boromir for the.
Yeah. So, but we don't really have that with this one. And we don't even have really a Rosamund Pike level character in terms of like, oh, okay, here's a focus point. Everyone's sort of coming in just sort of like as an even ensemble that we know of so far, which, so yeah, the mystery remains. And we could talk about it forever, but that would eat up this episode.
Yeah.
Well, tune in next time. The continuing saga of the three of us going,
what the hell's happening?
What are they thinking?
Why don't they give it to us, who are clearly better at all this stuff? Why didn't they ask us? We are so obviously skilled in this department. Anyway, so delusions of my grandeur aside. So let us move on. We do have, of course, a main topic for discussion this time. It is Jared's. So once more, please go ahead and you have the floor.
Talking about Lothlórien. I wanted to revisit this for a few reasons. Not quite revisit. We talked about Galadriel. That's separate from Lothlórien. But then as I was rereading these sections of the novel, I realized it's not a place you can revisit. Most of the locations in the book are seen on the way back, like at least the friendly ones, but Lothlórien is very obviously excluded from that return journey. The other positive place I can think of that's kind of similarly closed off from the Hobbits anyway is Tom Bombadil's land, and they have a similar uncanny vibe as well. It's also really telling, I think, that these places are, representatives of the old world. They're both places where the dominion of man hasn't come, but inevitably will. And we can talk about that as its own thing a little later, probably. It's also it's really important for the narrative, I think, to have this place that you can't revisit. This center of beauty and power and magic and all that will never be seen again, in a very literal way. The 2 or 3 chapters towards the end of Fellowship are all that we get. And for sheer writing, I think these are some of the most beautiful chapters in the book. And Lothlórien kind of confuses you even as you're in it. Like you feel Frodo years after the fact trying to write down what he saw and heard, and his verbiage, which is normally, pretty precise, starts getting confused and bewildered as he tries to describe something that's, for all intents and purposes, ineffable. He can't, even in his mind, he can't quite go back. But let's back up slightly. I mean, after all, we're in Lothlórien, where time is confused. So Lothlórien is, of course, the realm of Galadriel and her accessory husband Celeborn. It's in universe history, gets a little bit confused, but the most commonly accepted story is this, I think. Lothlórien was originally a realm of the Sylvan Elves between the rivers, the Silverlode and the Anduin. When the dwarves moved into Moria, way back in the First Age, the elves shifted a little further east, but nothing else changed much until after Morgoth was defeated and the survivors of the wreck of Beleriand started moving into Eriador and places and other parts of Middle-earth. Some Sindarin elves move into Lorien and Mirkwood and just kind of become kings. Why not? Like, Amdir takes the throne of Lorien, because he does.
Problematic.
We can get into this. At some point during the Second Age, before Eregion falls and Celeborn dies, Galadriel moves to Lorien, taking her purse along, of course. The ring Nenya comes to Galadriel. Then Amdir dies in the war against Sauron, and his son Amroth becomes king. Things are more or less fine for a while, it sounds like. Then the Balrog wakes up in Moria, and unspecified chaos damages Lothlórien and prompts Amroth, Ladylove, Nimrodel to, nope the hell out of Middle-earth. Amroth agrees to go with her. They're separated. He drowns in the Bay of Belfalas, and Nimrodel is lost forever. Legolas has a whole song about it in the book. It's really beautiful. You can read that part for yourself. I will not attempt to sing it for you. The Galadriel, the people of Lorien, the Galadriel beg Galadriel to rule them. Which, okay, again, maybe something to talk about. And Celeborn, big parenthetical, and Celeborn. Which, okay,
featuring Celeborn.
Featuring Celeborn. I would too, honestly. I mean, she's cool. She plants the first Malorn trees, the famous golden-leaved trees of Lorien, and uses the power of Nenya to restore and protect the land. Things go pretty well for a while, until around the time of Lord of the Rings, when orcs, begin to attack the forest, and events happen that we're all familiar with, and so on. And then after the fall of Sauron, and this is something that I'm a little surprised Jackson left out of the movie, just because his impulses are towards maximalism. Galadriel and Celeborn lead a force of Galadriel to Mirkwood to attack the old fortress of Dol Guldur, which they destroy, and things are cool again for a little while, and that would have been a fun thing to see on screen, I think. But maybe not, given what happens in The Hobbit. Anyway. Yeah, but the power, after Sauron falls, the power of Nenya and the elves general is over, so as we know, Galadriel leaves Middle-earth. Celeborn stays behind, ruling a remnant of the Galadriel for a little while, and then he goes too, and Lothlórien fades. It's just over. And while those chapters are beautiful, they're suffused with this melancholy. Like, the elves don't know what will happen if the One Ring is destroyed, but Galadriel, at least, is pretty convinced it means the end of everything she's fought to preserve. I think of the chapters are so beautiful, and I think of the opening of the Silmarillion when Iluvatar uses the discord of Melkor to make the music of the Ainur even more beautiful. Would Lothlórien work as well as it does if we weren't in suspense over its survival? Like, we know Sauron would destroy it, but the uncertainty about whether the victory of good over evil will actually be good for everyone is so powerful. So, to me, there are two functions of Lothlórien as like a space in the book. There's the narrative one. It's a rest stop after Moria, where we get space to grieve for Gandalf, and the Fellowship is kitted out with all the stuff they'll need later in the book, like the vial and the rope and the whatever. Rope is, never mind the rope. I was for a second, it's like, that's movie only, and then no, it's in the book. And things like the Mirror of Galadriel provide exposition and some tension about what's going on in the Shire, and that's all fun. But there's also this second function, which is more, I want to say it's a poetic function, not poetic in the sense of the language used, although it is really beautiful, but more in the effect that the chapters produce. They reintroduce that sense of the uncanny that I think is basically missing since Tom Bombadil, and they bring out this powerful melancholy. Before this point, there's a pretty basic good versus evil thing going on, but Lothlórien just complicates everything. I mean, by having Galadriel refuse the ring, it doesn't complicate it in narrative terms. Like, there's no tension over will we have a queen? But it kind of burdens you, the reader, with the knowledge that victory is going to come at this almost unimaginable cost. But at the same time, you can't do anything but fight for that victory. So, even though it means you'll never be able to go back to this place. Having said all that, would you want to live there?
No.
Why?
Expand on that.
Lorien is beautiful, but it's too beautiful in a sense. And I don't mean it is created by Galadriel, and that doesn't mean it's unnatural, but I think I would find it unnatural, and I would have a hard time feeling so unmoored from time. And I know that because we have all been unmoored from time for a while now, and I don't super care for it. There is this sense of stasis there, and Galadriel acknowledges that this stasis cannot hold, which is really important. But I think I might stay there for a little while. Take a long vacation.
Stay until the moon changes.
Right? I think that's about as far as I would go. That's a good question. I really like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it puts me in mind of something funny that I just remembered from the first and really only Tolkien zine I ever subscribed to way back when in the 80s, after I had read Lord of the Rings the first time, through Mensa. Yes, I know. Yeah. Through this is the Beyond Bree zine. Actually, no, I have subscribed to more than one zine, but more on that later. And one of the first issues I got someone had created the idea of it was jokingly. This is by no means serious. Imagining what a modern day Middle-earth tour package would be like. Flying to various places and checking things out. And the idea is, come stay in Lothlórien for a day or two. And I remember, there was sort of like a riff on the idea that it may seem like a longer period of time or something like that. And it's sort of like, this kind of, funny idea of taking a characteristic, a part of Tolkien's creation, sort of amping up its elements. I think it ties into this wider question, where do people belong? And there's one could say, a dark side to this. The idea that it is only something that allows certain people in, or certain people can only be there for a while as it's constructed as a space. And more on that in a bit. But there are exceptions. Aragorn is perhaps the greatest one that we know of, in terms of not being an elf. But it is... it's interesting to contrast it on two levels. You contrast Lothlórien with, say, Rivendell, both of which are elvish enclaves, but both of which have very distinctly different functions. But you can also contrast it, and you're, I think, even more expressly invited to contrast it between Lothlórien and Fangorn. In both cases, what we have is something that is, this is not a deep theory. I'm just merely sort of putting this out there. The idea that something is so refined, unique, and it's fragile, really, about Lothlórien. It's more fragile than I think most might want to allow for it. The person who is most conscious of its fragility is Galadriel herself, as for the reasons that Jared just outlined. And but beyond this question of fragility, the question of, is stasis a good thing? If you stay there, does time just sort of spread out? Which is itself is kind of interesting, because that's almost, in fact, maybe that's intentionally, much like, thinking about Bilbo talking about the ring, butter scraped over too much bread. Is there a sense of that in Lothlórien as well, in a way that's more sublimated throughout the fact that it's like, but we're on the good side of things. It's like, well, maybe, I don't know.
The sort of deep uncanniness of this section is so... I don't know how it never really struck me before, but when I was reading these, I was like, oh my god, this is actually pretty creepy.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, but there's like, as they get closer to the center, to Carascaladon, there's time starts to fold in on itself, so that Frodo has like not even quite a vision of like a young Aragorn. When he sees Aragorn in that place, he sees present Aragorn, but he also sees sort of layered over him the younger Aragorn who has already been there. And he has this sense that, when he leaves, there will still be an imprint of Frodo, because time has stopped here. It's like the Nexus in Star Trek. Like, you leave an echo of yourself behind, like Guinan is wandering around Lothlórien. And it never unsettled me before somehow, but reading them in isolation, I was like, the stasis is unsettling. It is unnerving. It is kind of Bombadil-esque. It's less overt, but it's still there, and it's beautiful, but it's not a comfortable place.
Yeah, there's Bombadil. There's a warmth to it. He's weird as all get out, but there is a warmth to Bombadil himself, possibly because he's just kind of a clownish figure. Galadriel and the entirety of the residents of Lothlórien. First of all, we don't really see Haldir is kind of the only other guy that we hang out with
this is key, though, I think, is that we don't see anybody.
It's weird.
You hear them when they're in to contrast with Rivendell, which the book explicitly contrasts Lothlórien with both Rivendell and Fangorn. You go to Rivendell, you go there, and when Frodo wakes up, there's a feast. There's named people around him. He sees everybody. It's a community. You go into the Hall of Fire. It's a place to sing a song. When they go to Carascaladon, they don't see really any elves except for some guards and then the people in like the court of the Lord and Lady. They hear a bunch of singing and they see lights in the trees, but it's a very sterile place.
And I think that the Jackson movies did a very good job of delineating these worlds, particularly in color. Rivendell is so rich and red. There's all these reds there, and then contrast that with Lothlórien, which is the most blue.
It's very chilly, which is such an interesting visual choice, because it's the golden wood.
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
But then you get to the heart of Elvendom on Earth, and it's just like walking through glass.
Yeah, and everyone speaks so slowly.
Yeah, and the frame rate is tweaked so that everybody is a little floaty. They did a great job with that, but
yeah, and the fact that they got Liz Fraser to do the singing certainly pleases the music nerd in me, but it's also just a great artistic decision on their part. One of many when it comes to guest singers throughout the thing. Well done, Howard Shore and team. But maybe you've raised some very interesting points here. I find myself sort of thinking through all this. I think something sort of maybe to bring out as just a tiny but telling point. Well, there are two I'll throw at you. First is in Carascaladon itself, and that is after they arrive. It's notable that, Legolas pretty much hoves off and hangs with the elves for the most part. And the subtext is, you're not invited, and it's not like anyone else comes along. I mean, certainly,
he does take Gimli with him a few times, though.
That's true, and it is wondered about. So this sort of like you see the roots of that. So you're all right about that, but everyone else is kind of like
it's their rom-com montage.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So aside from that, very telling moment, and you're absolutely correct. Everyone else is more sort of like you get a sense that Frodo and Sam are just sort of walking around going and taking it all in, and it's no surprise that Sam is the one to first articulate, going like and just sort of talk about feeling just a little more uncomfortable and all. And again, that fits in very well with Sam. But something else, I think, sort of to maybe go back to where we first approached Lothlórien, is how the uncanny isn't quite yet. In other words, there's a sense of how the borders function. And that's where Haldir and his company come in very handily, because on the one hand, they approach and there's the Song of Nimberdale, and we have Legolas, through the song and explain the history of it. We get a grounding of it. And then we get a series of, get a series of military moments. And it's notable how in this is, when I say military, you could say sort of like militarized, maybe more accurately. It's notable how Tolkien, the veteran, sets up refuges and what they're like throughout the book. So in other words, the flet that everyone ends up on, coming off the ground into the trees where Haldir and everyone is, going like, okay, stay safe up here, is a refuge as much as Henneth Anún is with Faramir and everyone else. But Henneth Anún is, of course, a place of gathering, comfort, warmth. Even with certain beauty with the waterfall, it is a sense, much more so in the book than in the movie, of course, that's sort of like, you can sort of relax here. You can have good, frank, heart-to-heart chats. Here's something where, you've got Sam worried about, climb up there, I'm going to fall off, everything. Yeah.
Just roll right off.
And, and you don't entirely feel safe. And Frodo, of course, really notices that because he hears the orcs in the night. He realizes he's not quite asleep yet and looks down. And of course, we see Gollum, creeping up the tree before he goes away. And, it's good story function, the idea that, Gollum's still there, the pursuit is still on. But at the same time, it's also sort of like you may be at or near elven protection, but it's not really feeling good. You're not really feeling like, okay, great. Something's still a little off. But then you switch from that into stepping into Lórien, and even Haldir's like, now you're in Lórien. Now things are different here. And the following day. And I think that's very interesting how it's sort of this sharp division between there's the outside world, and then all of a sudden you're consciously in the spot, in the zone.
The paranoid border aspect of it is a whole thing to tease out, I think, actually. Like, dwarves aren't allowed in Lórien because of some unspecified... as far as I know, there's no written account of what actually transpired. The Balrog is awakened, the dwarves flee Moria. I feel like the implication is that they tried to get into Lórien, possibly for help, possibly to try to take over. You don't know. But whatever it was, the elves are now like, nope, no dwarves, which is interesting. And it also, their paranoia, I think also, for a lot of people, maybe raises the question of like, well, why isn't Lórien doing anything? Why are they just sitting there? Because they're clearly quite powerful and capable of acting. And I think for me, first of all, Lórien isn't that kind of place. Like, that's not what it's there for in the story. But also, I think what you're supposed to get out of this is that elves really are powerless at this point in time. They are fully capable of defending themselves. They are no longer capable of mounting an offense against Sauron. There isn't much that they can do. So they're left fencing themselves in, seeming very powerful, being very wise and beautiful, but just not able to affect anything.
Like a Fabergé egg.
They're Lórien is a gigantic Fabergé egg.
Well, given the symbolism of that and what happened to the Tsardom, there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of like people tend to, I feel like, interpret Lórien in terms of like, with great power comes great responsibility. They clearly have great power. They have the ring. They have all this stuff. But not all power can be used equally. So to demand Lórien to be a more active participant in the world is to misunderstand the kind of power that it has, which is the power of preservation, healing, freedom from illness. The ring, it's like a hospital almost. It's not anything more than that. You wouldn't ask a hospital to, come settle a domestic dispute.
No, that is it is very telling that, and it's not something that is talked about within the texts of the Lord of the Rings itself. But Lórien is one of the Valar. He is the twin brother of Mandos. So you have the twins healing and death, which I think is nice.
Yeah.
Good job. But Lórien, is he Irmo or Namo?
I think
his
Irmo.
Real Irmo.
Yeah.
So Lórien is just the name of the place where this particular Valar makes his abode in Valinor, and so it's this garden of healing, and to have that, it seems a conscious choice on Galadriel's part to reject her former kind of desire for violent adventure in leaving Valinor in the first place, which we've talked about way back in episode 8 or so.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Go listen to it, though. It's a good one.
It's a pretty solid episode, but she creates this place that has various names over its existence, but is most frequently shortened to Lórien, and it does what it says on the tin.
It's a dreamy place.
Yeah,
he's the master of dreams.
And the Sylvan elves in particular have always been the type to run and hide rather than fight themselves.
That's so valid. I'm so there with that.
Right? But so it makes sense that, they're not the ones fielding an army in defense of anything.
Yeah. What do you make of, speaking of the Sylvan Elves, this recurring thing where the Sylvan Elves will not rule themselves, but either ask for a ruler from an outside party or are sort of ambiguously conquered? We don't know.
Right.
Like, how did the Sindar end up in Lórien on top?
It feels very similar to the, no doubt, apocryphal story that the Kievan Rus liked to tell about bringing down, about the people, the Slavic tribes asking the Viking, the Rus, to come down and rule them. It really feels like that, but it happens all the time. I don't get it. What's going on, guys? Is it another one of those uncomfortable race things where,
like, I get it with Galadriel because she's living there already. She has the ring. They're like, you've got this. You can just take over. You've got the power to do this. And she refuses the title of queen, and that's the whole thing. It's very nice of her, I guess. But why do the Sindar get this privileged position? And this also, I don't think I mentioned this, but the elves of Mirkwood are not ruled by a Sylvan dynasty. They're ruled by Sindar. Legolas's dad, Thranduil, is a Sindarin elf. So why does this keep happening? And and this tangentially related, I guess, when I was looking at background stuff for this, one of the reasons Nimrodel leaves Lórien and dies is that she feels like the Sindar and the Noldor just bring chaos with them wherever they go. So she's like, I'm out.
This is a call out.
I can't deal with you guys.
Which seems fair. They do seem to kind of ruin everything wherever they go.
Thanks for the destruction. We really appreciate you having her around. Great. Thanks. Yeah. Good. It occurs to me that, without this steps away a little from Lothlórien, but to get into this sort of this sense of history and tension, there is the fact that I think arguably Tolkien's one of his more realistic, for lack of a better terms, things is his idea of the elves as never being a uniform community from the start. That there was always this sense of fracturing right from Cuivanen, right from the very beginning, where some did not take the road. That there were always going to be these disparate communities in various forms and ways. And as the Silmarillion was revised and reworked and conceptions was done all the time, this almost kind of multiplied. It's sort of the idea that, there's some here, there's some there. There are occasional mentions of wandering elves on their own in like Tarnafuin or things like that, or in other spots in Beleriand. There's these fractured communities, which may be its own sign. So
we should probably define really fast the Sindar in case we haven't talked about this before, and I don't think we have specifically the differences between the kindreds, is that the Sylvan elves are part of a group of elves who, were summoned to Valinor to the west, and they very specifically did not cross the Misty Mountain. So they've never gone further west than that. The Sindar did go further west, all the way to, at that point, the western coast of Middle-earth, to Beleriand and all that. They didn't go any further than that. And then when the Noldor, the High Elves, the Elves of the Light, when they come back to Middle-earth, they mingle with the Sindar and sort of, the ones who didn't go as far west as Beleriand, the Sylvan Elves, they're the Dark Elves. They never saw the light. The Noldor are like Elves of the Light. In the middle where they meet are the Sindar, who now have learned a lot of like the wisdom of Valinor and all that, but have never been there. But they're still, quote, more elevated, unquote, than the Dark Elves, who never met any of the ones who came from Valinor. So
it is interesting that it feels a little racy.
Yeah.
But they ostensibly these are all white elves, so it is interesting.
Well, I mean, to get a little problematic here, I think only the Noldor are explicitly described as having pale skin. So there's a distinct chance that everybody else is an elf of color, but probably not. I'm betting not.
I'm gonna bet. I'm gonna bet against that.
And supposedly the Vanyar are the only ones who are the blondes, so there you go.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think it's the Vanyar, and then I think a lot of the Sylvan elves, too.
Oh.
Like, in Lothlórien, there are elves with blonde hair.
Right, yeah.
So it's just the Noldor who are the weirdos with the dark hair.
Yeah, and two of them have... I was trying to look for some Lothlórien stuff in this History of Middle-earth, the Morgoth's Ring volume that I have, and somehow stumbled upon two of Feanor's sons having red hair, supposedly.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Fell down quite a wormhole.
There's a lot of very beautiful fan art of those red-haired boys.
Oh.
I just mentioned that.
Yeah.
For those interested academically.
The things we could add. I'll throw out something interesting that Tolkien, the classic retrofit by Tolkien, but in a way, something we maybe haven't quite talked about yet. But in the same way that Galadriel emerged in the text, so too did Lothlórien. In other words, this was not something that was a conception.
I was going to ask you about this, actually, because I don't know the history of the actual writing of these chapters.
Yeah, no, I need to do some double checking on this to be absolutely sure. Unfortunately, my time got away from me for a bit, so I didn't have a chance to do a proper
Eurovision.
Reread. Yeah. Eurovision's vitally important, and I will. Anyone who says otherwise,
it is important.
Ukraine should have won, but I'm fine with Italy. Let's see. So,
Shots fired.
Yeah. The Ukraine got top 5. I'm happy. Let's see. So the thing is that the conception of Lórien is fleshed out, of Lothlórien is fleshed out more with time as Tolkien just puts it in, reconsiders it, and therefore this is kind of where, in the same way that the history of Galadriel emerges more thoroughly after the Lord of the Rings is written, so too the history as such of Lothlórien, and that the two are of course intertwined. And again, Unfinished Tales has most of what you need on that front in terms of specific details. But again, there's not as much in there. The thing that's interesting though is that slightly countering your point, Jared, although it's not, you weren't wrong, is that we do visit Lothlórien a little more in Lord of the Rings in the appendices with the story of Aragorn and Arwen. And
if you want to take that route,
I will take that route.
I meant the hobbits can't go back, but okay.
I will take that route for a reason, though, because it is an interesting way for Tolkien to sort of get one last little bit in of Lothlórien in sort of before and after phase, although very, very lightly set out. We do get the scene that is clearly Aragorn is remembering it when Frodo sees him on Cairn Amroth, and that's where he's dreaming. We actually get that moment talked about in some more detail where Aragorn and Arwen met, where Aragorn didn't expect to see her there, and then they did, and then they agreed, they plighted their troth at that time. And then, of course, at the end, after Aragorn dies, and this is not, there's the vision in the film, but is not specifically laid out as meant to be that, is that Arwen goes to Caer Amroth, lies down, and passes away there. And the idea is that at that point, that Lothlórien is essentially no more. It's emptied, and there's a sense of that, this is just a last little moment that's sort of carrying over.
They build an Applebee's.
Yeah, paved over. The other thing I wanted to bring up while I was thinking of it, and it keeps going back. I want to make sure I have it, because not I think it's a spectacular thought. I just had this thought, just throwing it out there, is that oh gosh, it's gone again. This is really annoying. Let's see. If someone else wants to take over, I'll come back to it.
It feels very Lothlórien.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, you said when you proposed this topic, I think, that you were proposing it because someone was wrong about something on the internet.
Somebody's wrong on the internet, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm kind of curious.
Well, I didn't want to frame a ton of stuff as being like, well, this is my platform and I'm going to talk about you specifically, Guy, on the internet.
No.
But that's kind of what I was getting at without saying so. It's the thing about, like, Lothlórien having the responsibility to act if it has the power to act. Which, again, I don't think it has the power to act for the most part. Like, it can only take on Dol Guldur because Sauron has already fallen at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they can't do what people want them to do. And I think the gated community vibe that Lorien kind of has and the sort of tense relationship with the dwarves kind of leads people to think like, oh, well, this is a community with power that is refusing to exercise that power, which, again, I don't think they're able to exercise the power that you, the reader, may be wanting them to.
Yeah, that feels like a fundamental misreading of the text.
Yeah, I think the comparison was to, like, American liberalism specifically that this person was making, and I was like, I don't think that's... I know, allegory versus application, I don't think this is applicable. I think you are reading something into it that isn't there.
And Galadriel, we've talked about this before, I think, that, Sam says to Galadriel in the mirror moment towards the end of it, you'd set things right, and her response is, yeah, it would start there, but it wouldn't stop there. And while she's obviously talking about the ring and what's temptations and brings out that other thing too. Yeah, we could use this, but we're not going to. Mm-hmm. And your point too about I always love after they've taken over where Dol Guldur is and all that, they rename it. Yeah, it's East Lorien now, and I'm like, that is the worst name. East Lorien, please.
Well, I think Celeborn named it, and he's
of course
the purse named it.
We should have a Celeborn episode. I don't know what you would say, but I really want to see if there's anything to him besides his association with
just
Galadriel.
An episode-long roast of Celeborn.
Sit down, son. We got to.
I mean, all we have to do is just say teleporno, and that's it.
That's still
the episode.
Mystifying to me. That is still so weird that Tolkien, who knew ancient Greek, was like, yes, this is what I want to go with.
Come on, man.
It's crazy. I have remembered what struck my mind earlier, and that is something that is perhaps, we've talked about Lorien, we've talked about what it has, but perhaps one of its most, dare I say, iconic things about it, we have talked about the Malorns.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk about the trees, because this actually ties into something of what you were saying, Jared, in terms of the idea of like who is ruling over the place and what they bring with them. There is a hint, and this is more in the deeper reading, but there is a hint of ecological colonialism going on here in a very real way. It's not just simply magic. Something that is very interesting, for instance, is the fact that to go back to the description of Numenor that comes with Eldar and Erendis from the Unfinished Tales, is that there's talk there is like, oh yeah, and there were Malorns on Numenor. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. How did that happen? But you do get the sense of, oh, okay, so these are the type of trees that get brought over from, Valinor. They're hallowed. They have this sort of roots there. Now, there's no one-to-one line. We're not talking any White Tree of Nimloth situations. Like it went from here, then from here, and there. We don't get that.
It's a whole species.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we do get a sense of sort of like, a really big set of tall trees, clearly a dominant species, and clearly, the other trees are probably not, going, hey, wait.
Invasive.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. I don't know if you were about to say this, Ned, but now I'm talking. So,
go.
Is that Malorns or Melurn? Sindarin. Well, whatever. Anyway, they won't grow anywhere in Middle-earth. except in Lothlórien. They didn't grow there before. Galadriel brought them with her because I think Gil-galad gave her the seeds because they wouldn't grow in Lindon.
Something like that.
Like he got them as a gift from the Númenóreans and they wouldn't grow there, so he was like, I don't know, you take them.
Regift.
Yeah, so before Galadriel came, Lórien was just a forest. It was just an ordinary thing. And there's still some of those trees in the outer fringes, but the center, I think, is implied to be 90% or more Malorn.
Mm-hmm. Especially Karas Galathon itself, which description that when he's on Cairn and Amroth looking out, it's like there's some hill of monster trees, and again the fact they can't quite tell what it is kind of interesting too.
It reads as towers to him. He can't.
Right? Yeah. It's just so huge, and we get the moment in the film, but in some respects that's an approximation almost of the weird impact, again uncanny, that it has. And of course there is the bit, of course, the fact that we do have one other Malorn, and that is of course what happens in the Shire, as we talked about last episode, where it gets planted and grows and thrives. And in a weird way, you could say the ecological domination of Lórien continues in the Shire, because not only that, because what is one of the names of Sam's daughters?
Eleanor.
There you go, after the flower. So you do get the sense of how things carry over, but it's also very interesting that it is our gardener, Sam, who is the one who has this deepest response to this. Galadriel clocks this in terms of the gift, and it's sort of interesting that she just gives him this little hint of it. The idea being that we could almost argue on the one hand, this is exactly what the Noldor would do. It's like, here's your hyper fertilizer and this one big special plant, and all that. We figured it all out for you. Of course, the Noldor would do that, but at the same time, it is tying in with the idea that this is a fenced off, can't be shared, can't be expressed thing. One other thing I think is really important, and it's remarked on in text, I forget the exact lines, but it's very clearly remarked on, is the idea that everyone's visiting in winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not the true glory of the trees. You're not seeing them first. You're seeing all the golden leaves on the ground instead. You're seeing them at their seasonal worst is what it is, as opposed to full thing. You're left to imagine that. A very Tolkien move. You're not actually seeing the glory of a place. You're seeing the after echoes.
She also her language when Galadriel says she says to, I think to Sam when she's giving him the thing. That'll be an echo of Lórien, which you have seen only in our winter.
Yeah.
Which it is outside winter as well. It's February, I think, when they're there. Mm-hmm. But she says our winter, and Lórien is clearly on the way out, even as they are there. It is already fading. So I've just always loved that little bit of wording that she does, which is like acknowledging you're seeing it in winter, but you're also seeing it at the end of its life.
Yeah. And I think it is touching that, Galadriel does give this gift of the Malorn to the hobbits. It is like, oh, look, it's Lórien getting to live on in a certain way, but it is also showing it to an entire population that would never have been able to seen it before, and that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, the way trees work in Tolkien is they're almost always, except for in the Old Forest and parts of Fangorn, they're like a blessing. Like, Mordor doesn't have any trees. There aren't really any evil trees except for Old Man Willow and the Huorns, which are granted, pretty big part of the narrative, but still.
Even then, they're not necessarily evil. They simply have their own agenda, which
and they
sometimes...
are dangerous. And the giving of a Malorn to the Shire is not... I mean, you can definitely read it as ecological colonialism, I think, but it is intended to be a blessing.
And it is only one.
These trees are a blessing. It's only one. She's not taking over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Fangorn, Ned, you brought this up briefly a little bit ago, but the comparison between the two, I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. Like when Merry and Pippin are in Fangorn and they're like, Galadriel and Celeborn told us not to come here, and he's like, I would have told you the same about them if you were going that direction. Is such a cool, like, just because everybody's good or even slightly on the same side doesn't mean that they're safe for you. There's a very similar kind of, we'll maybe let you in but not let you out kind of thing going on.
And the fact, too, that pretty much everywhere, one regards Lothlórien and Galadriel with at the least suspicion, and two conflates them. They're essentially seen to be one and the same, where she spins her webs or things like this. It's sort of like, it almost makes it seem...
wood.
Yeah. It makes it seem like there's Lothlórien, there's Galadriel, and that's it. And it's, it's reductio ad absurdum, but it's also something that, we see, people do this all the time, in terms of, reducing everything down, that way. And the fact that there is this, it fits in with the uncanniness and the sense of, it's like, I don't know, and all that, everyone's at the very least going like, I don't wanna, do we have to? And I think that is interesting too, because in a different narrative, we would have heard all that first and then gone to Lórien, because it's sort of like you hear all these things that turns out, oh, it's actually kind of nice or whatever. Instead, we get the uncanny first, and then it's the experience of having been through that, trying to explain to everyone else after the fact, no, you've got it wrong, whether it's the Rohirrim or whether it's, this, it's sort of like, whether it's Fangor, or whether it's other things. It's like, yeah, but our experience was a little different. And then you have people going like, yeah, what if? And, part of that is, I think, Tolkien sort of working out the idea that you can have, maybe an aesthetic experience that you're trying to express it to someone else, and they're like, yeah, that sounds crazy to me. So, and there may be something to that, or maybe, I don't know.
Well, that kind of, I did mention Frodo, the way Frodo uses language when he's, again, the conceit is that Frodo has written all of this, or most of it. The chapter and, I guess, paragraphs where he's, in the heart of Lothlórien and carrying Amroth, the heart of the realm as it was of old, I think is the line. The language starts getting very bewildered. He's searching for words as he's writing this down. Like, I always think of this sentence where he's like, he saw no colors except those he knew. I can't remember the colors themselves, like gold, silver, blue, green, but they seem fresh. They seem suffused with meaning, but he's trying to articulate it and he can't quite articulate it. And I know I've had that experience so many times about aesthetic experiences that I've had. And I really appreciate that part, just in terms of the writing, but I also like that he doesn't go, it was indescribable. It's like the book itself can't find the language, which for Tolkien, a philologist, he's pushing language to its point of failure in a way. Like, it's just not going to be able to do everything, no matter how much you love it. Yeah. I don't know where I was getting with that, but like it's a little an overwhelming little cascade of prose in the middle of this hauntingly weird section.
And I think my final, I'm just sort of half giving me on time. I think I have a final thought here, is that I think one thing that's also very interesting about Lothlórien as we encounter it, is that we first see it at night, essentially, and then we start to see it in the morning, but then everyone gets blindfolded.
Yeah.
We feel Lothlórien first. We hear it first. We sense it first. The talk about sunlight on the face, things like that. That's very interesting. We go with our point of view characters essentially into Lothlórien literally blind. We don't know where we're going exactly. We just know we're in a forest and we're going somewhere, and we're experiencing a forest around us. So in some respects, the transition between the edge of the forest, where things seem a little more normal, and then when we're in the heart of Lothlórien, we're like, whoa, and all that. That is something that that is very, very vivid. And when Tolkien has moments where senses fail, are very interesting moments. You could say that this is not, I wouldn't call it a parallel, but a weirdly equivalent moment would be in Shelob's lair. Senses fail there too. You can't see where you're going. And in terms of hearing and other things, it seems like all your senses are deadened. Here they're heightened to a degree, but there's one key one left off because of these other factors. And I think that's just it's a quietly dramatic way to introduce yourself to a place. You're not seeing it get closer and near. It's like, okay, it doesn't come into focus slowly bit by bit. Instead, it's more like, where are the words? And then boom, you're there.
Yeah. He keeps on the way in, he keeps dropping veils between the viewpoint characters and the thing around them. Like, again, they see it at night, but they also Frodo can't communicate with the elves around him because only Haldir knows the common speech, and he doesn't know the Sylvan dialect. He only knows like the Elven Latin, which these elves don't know. And then when they cross the river, they get blindfolded, so he can't perceive it. And then so the cumulative effect is just like pushing through cobwebs until you finally, like, you're waking up into this dream, into Lorien. Which is, like you said, it's such a cool way to introduce this otherwise pretty indescribable thing. It helps if you're not describing it like you're not getting all this information along the way. You just get this, and it kind of this luminous center. Yeah, but it builds in such an interesting way where it's almost like it's building by destroying.
Addition by subtraction.
Yeah,
somehow.
by taking so much away, it makes that revelation, the blindfold comes off, and you're in the light, and the light doesn't grow on you. It's just this, it's like a visionary experience.
Yeah. I think that feeds into probably my last little thought, which is just kind of the little joy of this place that is perpetually in stasis until it disappears forever, changing everyone who goes into it. There's that line that Aragorn has when Boromir is like, this place is perilous, and you're, everyone who goes, if you go in, you won't come out unscathed. And Aragorn says, say not unscathed, but rather unchanged.
Yeah.
And I just find that's a nice little twist to going into a place where nothing changes, where nothing is allowed to change, and emerging changed yourself.
It's like a water filter.
Lothlórien is the Brita of Middle-earth.
No, yeah, like, how do people change when they come out, do you think? Because I know, to me it feels like when they go to Caras Galadhon, they meet Galadriel. There's this, everybody has this sense that she's offering something they want if only they will abandon the quest. And nobody really, I think Sam kind of articulates what he's like, the choice between flying back with a little plot of his own or something like that. And Boromir won't say, but it is immediately after that he's like, he tries to, not immediately, but that he tries to take the ring. He's like, she has shown him what it is that he really wants, and he's not able to, like, it's almost like it's stuck in his head now.
Yeah,
like, he can't make any other choice because he knows that this is what he wants. And it almost, in a way, the one who is most suspicious of Galadriel is kind of correct, because it feels like by testing him, she has broken him.
Yeah, he brought his peril with him.
Yeah, it is his choice to be broken in a sense, but it's also, he was, in a way, again, he was maybe a little right to be suspicious, but also he shouldn't have gone in the first place, because, the only evil you find there is what you bring with you. So...
That's good thought. Well, Jared, do you have a sort of final thought or the way you want to wrap this up session?
I mean, I had asked, would you want to live there?
Yeah, do you?
Yeah.
I would say no. I think if you had asked me when I was reading it for the first time, I probably would have said yes, because I was like, yeah, trees, that's awesome. Powerful, dramatic lady, that's awesome too. I'm into that. Like, keeping it on brand. I don't think that you could live there. I think it's beautiful, but it's insubstantial and it's fading, and I would lose my mind, probably in a very beautiful aesthetic way, but I don't think it's not safe for mortals.
You would make some great art.
Yeah. And then die, and the elves would remember me in song, and that would be it.
That doesn't sound too bad now if you put it that way.
Like, I've got to be confined somewhere. It's better than being in my little apartment surrounded by all the trash I refuse to take out.
But that's why you've got to move to the Lothlórien apartments. Now
there
you can
we go.
combine the two. Yes.
That sounds like an urban fantasy sort of thing. Like, when it's public domain, somebody's going to write some urban fantasy version of Lord of the Rings where the Lothlórien apartments.
No.
I don't want it. I'm saying it's going to happen.
Looking ahead to the next episode, the choice of topic has come back around to me. So, what to talk about? I thought we should go deep and dark and sad. So,
good.
let's go for something very, very fraught. And something sort of an area of Tolkien's legendarium that we've touched around. We haven't really delved into all that much, and that is writings on the First Age, but specifically one particular thing. So the the advantage, you could say, of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are that they are, engaging narratives as opposed to drier records of the past, as so often was the case with Silmarillion being Tolkien's Bible and things like that. Is one he created, you could argue, for this world, and his other ways of whether there are historical listings of years and things like this. However, of course, he did create all these tales, and famously, they're sort of, especially as they're packaged now, there are the great tales that as the way Christopher Tolkien talked about them in the years before he passed, things where you've got Beren and Luthien, and where you've got the fall of Gondolin, very, very crucial ones that were carried through and were deeply marked the rest of the legendarium as it went. Things you could argue, never quite shook. They occurred, and all that. There was one big one, however, that until I read it in the Silmarillion, I had no idea about, aside from maybe a name or two, and it really got me good there. And that is a story that was the closest one that Tolkien ever brought to a full developed completion. And a couple decades after Tolkien's death, Christopher Tolkien did just that. It's time to talk about The Children of Hurin.
Ooh. Yeah. And
that is the version of the Turin Turambar story that was after it had first appeared in the Silmarillion to the public eye in the 1970s, is the revised and then was also shared again in a much more complete version in Unfinished Tales. Finally, Christopher Tolkien released essentially a through-line, full narrative version with illustrations by Alan Lee, and we'll talk about those too, with a presentation I think came out in 2006, and it's good. It's also one of the darkest damn things he ever wrote.
Yeah.
I have this book, and now I have an excuse to read it, because I haven't read it yet, because it's so dark.
You got to be in like a solid headspace to crawl into it.
It messes with you, even in the abridged Silmarillion version. So,
right, yeah, no, this is not one. This is antithetical to happy, lighthearted hobbitry, for better or for worse, is what it is. It's certainly, there's much to talk about. There's lots of little problematic things crop up throughout it, and lots of things that are also just really good. There's also its roots and origins and various things, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. There's a lot to delve into this. It is a remarkable achievement. It is very much Tolkien's high tragedy, for lack of a better term, and it is something. Let's take the bull by the horns. so that'll be for next time in glorious summer. It'll be doom.
Yeah,
June gloom, baby.
Oh yeah, there you go. So we look forward to seeing you next time for that, and hope then we'll also have more not news about the Amazon series. We're just predicting that right now. We'll see. Yeah, one of these days we'll be surprised, and we'll be happily surprised one of these days. That is not this day. So moving on from that, great to have you with us as always. Thank you again very much for listening and spreading the word. We look forward to seeing you next time. So until then, we'll see you. Thanks again for listening to this episode of By the Bywater. Please subscribe and rate us via your favorite podcast listening options.
Episodes and show notes are at megaphonic.fm/bythebywater, all one word. You can also message us through here. Email us at bythebywater@megaphonic.fm, or follow us on Twitter at By-The-Bywater.
You can also follow us individually on Twitter and ask questions there. I'm at Vandroid Helsing.
I'm at Schwinter, SCHWINDTER.
And I'm Ned Raggett, 2 G's, 2 T's. By the Bywater is a proud member of Megaphonic Podcast Network. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. We hope you join us again next time. Until then, Namarie.